welcome along to the two-man wall. It's the 2022, I think, season. What year is it again? Preview with Johnny Ward and Adam Russell on Star Sports TV. And check out the microsite. There's loads of content on the Premier League, which you can get through. Full preview of some of the big games this weekend, and an absolute myriad of specials on the website itself. Who'll get the most goals? Who'll win the scratch? Who'll win the handicap? Who'll get relegated? Lots more kind of nuanced markets than that. Star Sports traders have been busy coming up with unique markets, and Adam Russell has a third tier football team to get behind the season, because Bolton Wanderers, of course, are now back in League One. Adam, how are you getting on?
Yeah, really good. Thank you, mate. Really excited to have the Premier League back. Obviously, we had the real heartbeat of British football in the EFL back last weekend. So, yeah, really exciting to have the Premier League back. And, I really love the start of the season markets. I think it's my favourite time to place football bets, because I think we always get that reset, really, because you almost, no matter what knowledge you get from last season, you just don't really know at the start of the season. And I feel like everyone's in the same boat in that regard. Everyone's kind of guessing a bit and hoping a bit, and a bit of bias comes into play as well. Obviously you get new arrivals from Europe in the transfer market, and kind of we don't really know what to expect. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to having a look through some of the outrights with you today.
Yeah, and stay tuned for Adam's little tidbits on the lower tiers, because you might remember he backed his beloved Bolton at 8-1 just to get promoted last year. They had the playoffs as a backup, and they ended up essentially getting promoted in an absolute canter. But it's obviously the Premier League we're going to be chiefly concentrating on. 4-6 Jack Grealish's Manchester City, and it's kind of 5-1 bar, and Star Sports traders think that only 4 teams, if at all, actually can win the league this season. The Liverpool-Chelsea thing, I was talking to Flynn Goward about this on Trader Chat the other day, Adam. The Liverpool-Chelsea being basically the same price is interesting. Liverpool, they were odds on to win the title at one stage last year. Now you can get them at 5-1.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one with Liverpool this season, isn't it? Because obviously, like you say, last season we all thought it was going to be a 2-horse race between them and Man City. And obviously, with the injuries that Liverpool got, particularly at the back and in midfield, they sort of fell away and didn't really mount a challenge. And to be honest, obviously, neither really did United in second place. What will be interesting this season is who can take that step up towards Man City. Obviously, we saw Chelsea win the Champions League, and we saw them win the Super Cup last night. It looks like they'll be bringing in Romelu Lukaku, so obviously a huge signing for them. Whereas Liverpool obviously haven't really invested as much in the squad. They've brought in Kanate at the back. Manchester United currently at 8-1. Can they take that next step and go on and become challengers under Solskjaer? Obviously, they've brought in Sancho and Varane. If they could potentially bring in maybe even a holding midfielder, it's hard to see how they would be far off this season given the talent that they've got in their squad. So I do think, particularly compared to recent seasons, I think there's probably more teams capable of winning it this season.
You reckon? We kind of need, like, if you look at Man City's form from December onwards, I think it's fairly safe to say we need Man City not to have that type of season. We need them to have more of the season of the previous maybe season and a half. They're 4-6, and it's very interesting to look at the handicap as well. When we're going to discuss the teams that maybe won't win the league but will outperform expectations. And the big gamble in this has been on Leeds, which is interesting. Obviously, Leeds in their second season back in the Premier League rather, under a genius of a manager, and they've been well back to maybe, I suppose, build on that experience of last year, also with home fans in Ellen Road, which is something I think they missed.
Yeah, exactly. I think that'll be a huge benefit to them, is that they sell out Ellen Road week in, week out. They have great travelling support. The atmosphere at Ellen Road is always has been one of the best in the country. I think that'll be a huge benefit to them. They haven't really massively made any moves in the transfer market this summer, which I think as a side coming into their second season in the Premier League is always interesting. Obviously, they probably exceeded expectations to a certain extent last year, but you did wonder if maybe they'd go into the market maybe for some more kind of proven Premier League quality this season. But they've really stuck with that core group that they went with last season. Obviously, we've seen how some of them perform. I think Rodrigo will get more game time for them this season than maybe last season. So that could be a big benefit to them up front. I think Bamford will still score goals. I think Rafinha is an excellent player. And I think he'll have a really good season. So I think it's not surprising Leeds have gone from 14s to 11s in the handicap at plus 36. Not sure it's the one for me because like I say, I just worry that whether they've not maybe invested in key areas perhaps as well as they could have done.
Well, could it be West Ham, who were told, along with Liverpool, are the two big losers? West Ham have been punted at all Ireland prices, I think 150s or whatever. There's 36 points in the handicap. Obviously, being led by, I guess, Declan Rice, who had such a good Euros as well.
Yeah, obviously they had a really good season last year. Again, I'm not too keen on West Ham this season. It's very rare for West Ham to have two good seasons on the trot. So,
what do you like in the handicap then?
Again, they haven't really invested. I like, and it seems maybe it's an obvious one in the handicap. I like Aston Villa, plus 38 points.
So I was talking to Flynn about this. So they've lost Grealish, yet you obviously think they'll get over that.
I think, despite having lost Grealish, on paper, they've probably got a better team now than they did at the end of last season. We saw towards the end of last season when Grealish was out injured that they really struggled without him, and it just sort of sold that over-reliance on Grealish. Now, obviously getting rid of him is a huge loss in terms of his stature at the club, but they've invested that money really wisely. And as their CEO said when Grealish left, they've, rather than try and replace Jack Grealish's abilities and qualities with one player, they've really gone with three in bringing in Emi Buendia and bringing in Leon Bailey and bringing in Danny Ings. We've seen
38 points in the spread.
Yeah, and I think that front three or four of Buendia, Ings, obviously they've got Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey, they've got Traore, who impressed at times last season. I think they've got a really good attacking group there, and I think they've strengthened the squad despite losing Grealish. So I think plus 38 for Villa at 14s is a good price, and I think
11-2 in the race for Europe.
Yeah, and I think that's more so because I'm not 100% sure about the likes of Everton this season. Obviously, we've seen that they've brought in a new manager in Rafa Benitez. It hasn't been the smoothest of appointments in that sense, obviously, with him being an ex-Liverpool manager. And the players they've brought in, very experienced, but perhaps on the kind of level that Everton fans might have been expecting. You know, they brought in Andros Townsend on a free transfer. They brought in Damari Gray. Obviously, you had a spell at Leicester, brought in Asmir Begovic, who's obviously a very experienced goalkeeper. And I think Benitez will make them very solid at the back, but I'm not sure they've really strengthened as they perhaps should have. Mentioned about Leeds, West Ham, I'm just not sure, again, whether they're capable of kicking on. Again, it will depend, I think, on how many goals they can get out of Mikel Antonio. If they're going to go with him as their main striker, you know, can they get 15 to 20 goals out of him if they're really going to challenge for Europe? I'm not sure. The other one in that market, Brighton, they're plus 43 in the handicap, 14s. Obviously, they've sold Ben White, who was was comfortably their best defender last season. So we'll wonder whether that'll have a bit of a knock-on effect. And that just sort of leaves us with Aston Villa in and amongst that group of cases. And like I say, they've strengthened well. Despite letting Grealish go, I think that they're definitely on the right track as a club. And Dean Smith has got them moving in the right direction. So that's me in the handicap.
And there is a handicap on goals as well, which I think is a really well worth looking at that market. The race to survive is obviously more self-explanatory. Only once have the three relegated to three promoted teams gone straight back down. Couple of teams odds on here: Watford and Norwich. Brentford are evens. Palace 6-4, and the market springer here has actually been Southampton, who are 7-2. I think they're threes now, even from 9-2.
Yeah, they're all the way in at threes now. Obviously, having let Danny Ings go, they've also let Ryan Bertrand go. He's gone to Leicester. It looks like Yannick Vestergaard is also rumoured to be a target for a couple of clubs, Tottenham included. So they potentially lose another important man at the back. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me to a certain extent to see Southampton shorten from 9-2 all the way into threes. We've also seen quite a lot of money in the first manager to be sacked market for Ralph Hasenhüttl. So yeah, that doesn't necessarily surprise me. I do think they could struggle this season. I'm not sure they've got, especially now they've let their main source of goals go, whether they've got the quality up front to to survive this season. Another one that interests me is Wolves at 8-1 in this relegation market. Obviously, they didn't have a great season last campaign, and Nuno has since moved on. Obviously, he's gone to Tottenham. They missed Raul Jimenez massively. Last season is obviously comfortably their best player and their main source of goals. I think a lot will depend on whether he is able to hit the ground running. Obviously, he had an awful injury, and it's great to see him back on the pitch during pre-season. But as we know, these long-term injuries and head injuries can have both a long-term physical and psychological effect on players. So if he struggles to hit the ground running, I wonder where they'll get their goals from. I also felt like when Wolves came up a few seasons ago, they had a very strong identity in terms of the
way they played in that gym.
They had a really strong. Obviously, Cody was rock at the back. They had the full-backs who were bombing forward and creating width for them. They had pace up front, and obviously they had goals in the form of Jimenez. And it just felt towards the end of last season that they'd kind of lost their identity a little bit somewhere along the way. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see how they adapt to a new manager and possibly a new style of play.
When you talk about Nuno as well, how do you think he'll get on at Spurs? Because Spurs, for me, are probably the most interesting team in the handicap, but a lot obviously depends on Harry Kane, who incidentally is 11-4 to be top scorer. I'd probably go with Mohamed Salah 7-2. I think he's refreshed this season, but Spurs could definitely go one of two ways this season.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think like you said, they are very interesting. They're plus 25 points in the handicap at 14, so. It's interesting one. I think it's really hard to say with Nuno. I think a lot of it will depend on Harry Kane's future. If they keep Harry Kane with the players that they've brought in, obviously brought in Hollis Heel, and it looks like they're bringing in Romero as well. So that'll be a great addition at the back. They probably, having let Alderweireld and Vertonghen go in recent seasons, they probably could do with another option at the back, and they've looked at Vestergaard from Southampton, for example. So I do worry about them slightly defensively this season, maybe a lack of experience at the back. But yeah, other than that, and I said the same for Tottenham last season, is in their squad, they've got excellent attacking options. They can play a 3, they can play a 5. They've got, obviously, in Harry Kane, they've got guaranteed 20, 25 goals a season if they can keep hold of him. So yeah, I think a lot of it will depend on how that goes. If he does move on, it becomes a matter of, how well do they replace him? Are they able to bring in the likes of a Lautaro Martinez from Inter Milan, somebody, with really proven European quality. So
indeed,
sitting on the fence.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. We can't have a strong view on everything, and obviously, a lot will depend on Kane. The pair of aces market I like, because what they've done here, the Star Sports traders, some of them are obviously quite enigmatic picks. Bruno Fernandes and Richarlison, Jamie Vardy and Kevin De Bruyne, both of them are 8-1. So effectively, who scores the most goals of the pairs? So these are basically two kind of random players thrown together. But the fascinating aspect of this is, if one of these players scores at the weekend, you get half your stake back. If both of them score, you get your full stake back, which means you have a free bet for the whole season. And rather, this is a little bit like last man standing. You want to look for a player that's taken on a pretty crap team this weekend, will probably score, you 50% of your bet back, and you can buy a few points on Saturday night. That's how it works, Adam.
Yeah, pretty much. You've got to look both long term and for the first game of the season here to get the offer, because it's a really nice offer from the guys at Star Sports. So far, the most popular pair in this market has been Vardy and Kevin De Bruyne, which I wonder whether that's just a case of, obviously,
big names.
We've talked about Kane already, and whether if he joins Man City, I think De Bruyne's chance in this market might fall back somewhat. But if Man City don't buy a recognised number 9, they'll go into this season obviously with Gabby Jesus as kind of their only option as a traditional striker. I'm not sure Pep is massively keen on that, on him as an option. So we've seen the likes of Foden and De Bruyne play in that false 9 role. So I wonder if a few people have taken a bit of a punt here on De Bruyne spending quite a lot of his time this season playing more as a false 9. Obviously, he's great from a dead ball, from free kicks as well. So that's an option. And obviously with Vardy, we know that if he's fit, that he'll score goals He'll probably again be on penalties for Leicester. So yeah, still at 8-1 those two, which I think is a good pair. I think Patrick Bamford and Neil Maupay is a bit more of an out there selection. But obviously Bamford had a decent season for Leeds last year. He actually missed quite a lot of chances. They made quite a lot of chances for the amount of goals he scored. So I think if maybe he can show a bit of improvement in front of goal, he'd be a good option. Obviously, Brighton create a lot of chances for Neil Maupay as well. The English contingent, I think, is an interesting one. We've got Calvert-Lewin, who had kind of his breakthrough campaign last season, and Jadon Sancho, who is, again, obviously not an unknown because we've seen what he can do at Dortmund and in the Champions League. But how will he adapt to the pace of the Premier League? Could he hit the ground running in a pair with Calvert-Lewin? We've got Timo Werner alongside Mikel Antonio. That's also at 9s. Obviously, Werner would have liked, I'm sure, more goals than he was able to return last season.
The potential is there, obviously.
The potential is there, and I think with Werner, you see he gets into good positions. And I think as a striker, that's always half the battle, isn't it? If you're not getting on the end of the chances, then you've probably got a bigger problem than if you're just missing them. So
Exactly, yeah. And I think, it's kind of like watching Morata play for Spain at times. But you mentioned Hasenhüttl as being kind of he's been the manager who's been backed in that market. The first to go, Patrick Vieira, 13-2. I think that'll definitely appeal to some people. And if you figure that Liverpool are going to have a particularly bad start to the season and Klopp's going to implode, he's 50-1. But what are your selections across all of these myriad of markets? What do you like before we go a little bit left field and get the Russell down the tier selection in the bottom rung and the League One and the Championship and so on?
So we can go through the card here because I'll start with...
Right, let's go through the cards.
Start with outright. I think Man City are obviously the team to beat. Really interesting. I had a chat with the traders before, and the biggest losers for them in the book at the minute, you won't believe this. Liverpool makes sense. Good price, 5-1. Got their injury men coming back. But West Ham, thanks to a huge bet at 150-1, West Ham to win the Premier League are the current biggest losers.
Wow.
In the Star Sports book. But I think I'll be avoiding that one. Man City are the team to be. Be interesting to see how Chelsea get on, because just looking at their squad, it's outrageous the amount of depth that they've now got. So if you're looking to take Man City on, I'd probably say Chelsea, but yeah, you can't look further than Man City. In the points handicap, I've told you I fancy plus 38 points Aston Villa at 14-1. If you want an outsider for relegation, again, I've got Wolves here at 5s. I think Brighton at 11-2 is a big price considering, I think they did well last season. They had great defensively. Obviously, they've lost Ben White, but their team isn't full of top quality Premier League talent. So I think Brighton at 11-2 to go down is a fairly good price. In the goal scorer pairs, I'm going to go with Bruno Fernandes and Richarlison.
And this is a very good interest bet, because if you're on your Saturday radio and you're just hoping for goals here or there in games you otherwise wouldn't give a rat's arse about, you have two players there who can score and profit, give you some profit in the season. And obviously if they score in the first week, you get half or all your stake back.
Well, exactly. That was my thought very much. Obviously, United kick off against Leeds. Fernandes has played a decent part in pre-season, so he'd probably start. If they get a penalty, it's likely that he'd probably take it. And Richarlison, Everton's first game is against the aforementioned Southampton, who are predicting to struggle. So as well as a kind of a long-term bet in the pairs market, I also think there's a chance that we could end up with Bruno and Carlson on the score sheet this week. And yeah, first managers to be sacked. It's hard to look past Hasenhüttl because I do think they've had a bad summer. But Mikel Arteta, 10-1. Obviously, Arsenal 9th last season, bear in mind. There's no European football this summer. They haven't really made any impact in the transfer market. The fans will be back. So if they get off to a poor start, they could turn very, very quickly, not just on Arteta, but on the club and the owners in general. So I'd be tempted there at 10-1. Again, similar logic with Spurs and Nuno at 16s. If they get off to a bad start, they could pull the trigger quite quickly. But yeah, I think I'm going to stick with Hasenhüttl at 8s, just because I think Southampton had a bit of a disaster so far this summer.
Yeah, and it's just so important that you spend a little bit of time looking at the fixtures in the first 4 or 5 rounds of games, because And often there's then an overreaction in terms of relegation markets. I think relegation markets and so on, they don't really factor in the likelihood of a manager being sacked and things being turned around. So look out for all of that. You might remember extolling the talents of Dawson Devoy for Bohemians, who's gone on to have an unbelievable European campaign since we were talking to you last. So I'm going to spend the rest of today watching Bohs in Europe and then watching Dundalk against Vitesse Arnhem in Tala. So that's my stab at lower level football. But let's talk briefly with yourself about some selections in the undercard, because this is where you particularly excel.
Well, I guess based on last season's record, I didn't do too bad. I had Watford to be promoted from the Championship. I obviously had Bolton to be promoted from League Two. I had Hull to win League One, which they did last season. So, yeah, you could say this is a bit of an area of expertise for me.
But we don't want to know what you tipped that won. We want to know what you will tip that will win.
So I think the Championship is really, really wide open this year. I don't think you look at the Championship this year and there's one team that stands out as kind of obvious favourites. Obviously, with the Championship, you always kind of look at the three teams that have come down the previous year. I think the way Sheffield United finished last season might take them a while to get their train rolling again. But I think in that sense, West Brom, always kind of when they're in the Championship, they're always there and thereabouts. They're a very much kind of a yo-yo team, and they've managed to keep hold of a decent number of players from that Premier League squad. So I think West Brom is a good shout. Hull City got off to a really good start at the weekend. And obviously it's quite difficult to go back-to-back promotions, but we've seen teams do it before. I'm pretty sure Southampton did it when they came up through the leagues. Did Leicester do it? They may have taken 2 seasons in the Championship. But that whole squad, they've kind of kept a good core of players together. They've started to produce some really talented youngsters through their academy. So, yeah, I think Hull could be a bit more of a long shot. But Championship-wise, I'd be going with West Brom as an out-and-out favourite, I think.
Beautiful, Adam. And it's been great catching up with you again. Really intriguing season ahead. I think we all agree something has to go awry with Man City for them not to win the league, but you'd never know. An up-and-coming Chelsea. Liverpool, I think the major point here is Mane and Salah, for the first time in a while, have had the summer off, basically. And remember that the COVID season of 2020 basically gave a lot of these players no break. And I think Liverpool desperately needed a break. They will be reliant on Virgil van Dijk come back to his best, but this title race might be a little bit more open than the betting suggests. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, mate. Just one more from me before the guys at Star shout at me. We need to give a big plug to this weekend's tipping competition. Obviously, a big one with the return in the Premier League. So we're going to ask you guys to give your selections for the 10 Premier League games from this weekend before the first one kicks off on Friday night. And whoever gets the most correct selections will win a £200 free bet. And we've got a £100 free bet for second place and a £50 free bet for first place. It's 100% free to play over at the starsports.bet site. And yeah, get your selections in. Don't forget our pair of aces offer. You can get 50% of your stake back in our goal scorer pairs market if one of them scores. You can even get 100% back if you manage to pick a pair where both of them score on the opening game. Definitely think about Salah for Golden Boot. The only thing I would say is we've got African Cup of Nations in terms of Liverpool's chances. That could be a big loss with Mane and Salah both sort of scheduled to play that. Also, they've got Naby Keita who would probably play at that. So that could have an impact. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I love these opening day markets because we'll know so much more this time next week than we'll know this week. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see how wrong we are.
Exactly, and we will be certainly wrong from time to time. But as Adam says there, you don't need to bet to win money necessarily. You can win on the tipping competition, and do remember to gamble responsibly. Check out the Star Sports website for all the previews, and we hope you enjoyed our 2022 Premier League I don't know what year it is anymore, Adam. The 2022 Premier League season.